A very good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this very special program. My name is Romeo Busiku. It's World Refugee Day tomorrow. World Refugee Day is commemorated every year on the 20th of June to actually honor the strength and courage of refugees. We are talking about people who have had to flee their homes. And on this day, we also encourage public awareness and support of the refugees who have had to flee their homes because of conflict. In the studio, I'm joined by three panelists, but then we shall also be joined by two other panelists online, that is via Zoom. I do have Miss Margaret Atieno. She is the Assistant Representative, UNHCR Protection. In the middle, I also do have Miss Adekemi Ndieli. She is the Deputy Country Representative, UN Women, Uganda.
Good afternoon.
On the far left, I do have Honorable Simon Gerard Menya. He is the Acting Commissioner for Refugees in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Welcome.
And online, we shall be having two panelists. That is Ms. Farida Charity. She's the Speaker, Yumbe District Local Government. And also online, we shall be joined by Ms. Juliet. She's right there. Ms. Juliet Were. She is the Deputy Executive Director, Women's International Peace Center. Thank you very much for joining us at this opportune moment right here on NTV. Let me start with you, Mr. Menya. What are the key policy provisions and interventions to ensure that refugee and host women's participation and benefit from the COVID-19 response?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Colleagues from UNHCR, from UN Women, and my other colleagues on online, and the public at large, I want to thank the NTV management for inviting us to discuss and to share with the public what the World Refugee Day, first and foremost, is all about, but most importantly, what are the policy implications that we have in place that we use in as far as international protection and management of these people of concern are. Let me begin by quickly saying that June 20th of every year, like the moderator gave in his preamble, is celebrated by the entire world as the World Refugee Day. And it marks celebrations of the signing of the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees, and it is held to show solidarity with those who have been displaced and to honor their resilience and determination to keep their families safe. The day is also marked to draw public's attention to the millions of refugees and internally displaced people worldwide who have been forced to flee their homes on account of wars, conflicts, persecution, human and naturally induced disasters around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, after defining what we mean by and how the World Refugee Day came into force, it's also important to reflect on some of the policies that the government of Uganda has instituted to promote and to ensure that protection and the management of refugees at large is done efficiently and also efficaciously. It would be prudent for me to begin off by also letting the public appreciate that Uganda has a total of 1,424,000 people. And this makes Uganda to be the third largest refugee hosting country in the whole world after Turkey and Pakistan, and the biggest refugee hosting country in Africa. And in Uganda, the 1.4 million of the 1.4 million people, 82% are women and children. And it is important that this data is provided for purposes of programming and planning, and also so that people appreciate where we are coming from and what type of people do we manage and protect in this country. What is it that we have as a country in as far as the policies and legislations are concerned to ensure that these people are protected well? One, we have the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda of 1995. Article 185 domiciles the protection and management of refugees in the office of the Prime Minister. And this explains why the Refugee Department is within the office of the Prime Minister. So that, we are mandated to coordinate, to supervise, to monitor, to inspect other development partners, and also to plan and program for all these persons of concern to ensure that they live a dignified life in that stay in the country. Besides this legislation, also we have the 2006 Refugee Act, which has a number of provisions in relation to how we should manage and protect these persons of concern in the country. We also have in the offing the Uganda refugee policy, which is before cabinet for approval, and then once it is approved, then it will go a long way to operationalize the Refugee Act of 2006 and the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, which talks of refugees being domiciled in the office of the Prime Minister. The other concern, or the other policy that we have in place, is what we call the Refugee Welfare Councils. Refugee Welfare Councils are constitutes of elected refugees in different leadership positions. We have the equivalent of LC1, we have LC2, we have LC3, and then we have 3 representatives that are elected at the national, to represent refugees at different fora within the country. And so these refugee welfare councils are also there, and the 42% of membership of these welfare councils are women. And that tells you the extent to which women are considered in playing different roles as far as the leadership positions are concerned in this country. We have affirmative action programs, especially for the girl child, at different interventions. For instance, we have tried to ensure that we encourage the girl child to attend the school, especially if he's a refugee. UNHCR and other development partners provide the necessities ranging from uniform to learning and instructional materials to these refugee girl schooling children. Sometimes even they provide them with sanitary towels, and some of them have been put into boarding schools, and there are entities that have provided, and they continue sourcing for resources, both financial and non-financial, to ensure that these children go to school, and some of them have joined universities and they're doing different courses. So there is that affirmative action program, especially for the girl child, to ensure that they benefit and they are adequately prepared, such that when they go back home at an appropriate time, they will be able to contribute meaningfully to the socio-economic emancipation of their countries where they come from. The other question that probably I need to quickly answer or respond to is that to what extent what policies probably are in place to ensure that women benefit from COVID-19 response? Well, I don't know what you. First of all, I don't know what was meant by how somebody can benefit from the from. But quickly, I can mention that there is always a silver lining in every dark cloud. During COVID, UNHCR has engaged women organizations or groups to manufacture as many masks as possible as a source of income.
That's intervention number one.
That's intervention number one.
Right.
The other issue is that many women, refugees especially, have been engaged to sensitize and create awareness on the dangers of COVID-19, but most importantly, how the population can avoid or reduce or limit its spread within the population, and they are earning a living. I know quite a number of women who have been brought on board, who have been recruited by different development partners to continue sensitizing and creating awareness. So in other words, during the COVID-19 pandemic, quite a number of women have been employed. I know that. But also I know that some women, especially refugees, continue to I'm trying to think loud actually.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
How they are benefiting out of this COVID-19.
Indeed.
I don't quite see many points in this, but anyway, probably I can stop there. I can stop there.
Oh, not so many interventions.
No, I don't see how they are benefiting out of this pandemic.
Actually, we were thinking of the key policy provisions. The key policy provisions and interventions to ensure that the refugee women, the hosts, actually and other vulnerable groups continue to benefit from this response of COVID-19. Not the pandemic, but the response by the OPM, Office of the Prime Minister. Yes.
Come again?
Yes, but we shall get back to you,
yeah,
Mr. Menya.
Yeah.
Mr. Menya, as you ponder about that situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Madame Margaret Atieno, you
Yes.
are the assistant representative of the UNHCR,
Yes.
and you are overseeing the UNHCR's protection work in Uganda. So help us understand, what are the key needs and programming interventions that can be used to ensure benefit for women, girls, and other vulnerable groups during COVID-19?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to the government of Uganda, to the people of Uganda, for the generosity and support extended to refugees. I've said it many times in many occasions that we do not take this for granted. Uganda is a great example of inclusion of refugees, and I think just to add to that point in terms of the policy, this is one of the greatest examples that we have seen, is that Uganda has included refugees in the response. It has not made any distinction. Everyone that is within the territory is benefiting from the same COVID response as any Ugandan nationality. So I think that is really one good, outstanding policy by Uganda that I would like to emphasize. In terms of, on the question of supporting refugee women and girls and other vulnerable groups during COVID, as the Commissioner mentioned, we are talking about 1.4 million people who have been uprooted from their homes. And of that 1.4 million, 82% are women and children.
Right.
So the discussion on gender, I think that really puts it into perspective. We are talking about millions of people who find themselves in a situation of displacement. And that in itself is already a pandemic, if you like, because that's the word we're all using now. It's already catastrophic because they carry with them a lot of trauma. They've suffered conflict, they have suffered persecution. During conflict, they go through a lot of very horrific experiences.
Right.
So that impacts them as people, but also it impacts on the gender roles and the power dynamics within the community and within the family. And this plays in different ways. So there's a lot of inequalities and there's a lot of discrimination.
Ms. Adekemi Ndiali will expound on the gender issue. What I need from you, Ms. Margaret, is to help us understand what are the needs and programming interventions to ensure that the refugee women, the girls, and other vulnerable groups actually benefit from this COVID-19 response.
Okay, so with COVID, specifically on the needs, we have seen that although everyone is affected, I'm affected, you're affected, refugee women and children suffer even more as the impact worsens the inequalities and the experiences that I just mentioned.
Right.
One of the biggest needs that we have seen and observed on television, and everyone has spoken about it, is the increase on sexual and gender-based violence. And this affects Ugandan nationals and refugees alike. For refugees, it manifests in the form of domestic violence. We see the commoditization of girls, girls being married off very early in forced circumstances. We see also that the loss of livelihoods and the loss of dignity. So that is the big problem, if you like, in terms of sexual and gender-based violence, and also the fact that they've lost the means of livelihood. The closure of schools, for example, would normally, schools would normally accord children and girls especially some form of protection. There are very few girls who find that opportunity to go to school, and it affords them some form of protection. Now that they're out of school, you can imagine the types of violations that they would be exposed to. So these are the things that we are seeing. The access to services is another very critical area.
Sexual reproductive health services.
Yes, access to services generally because of the restrictions of movement and the confinement policies. Women are not able to access the health services in the manner that they would. You can think of the pregnant woman who needs prenatal care, and also who needs to access reproductive health services. Those who have suffered rape, for example, there's no clinical management. Normally, in normal times, they would be able to access this rapidly. They're supposed to access it within the first 72 hours. So this has become a big concern. We also concerned about the mental health situation of the refugees and the women and girls especially. As I said, they carry a lot of trauma. They're already in that situation. But then the stress and the anxiety that comes with this pandemic just, increases or worsens that. So we've seen reports of, unfortunately, suicides. There have been reports of suicide since March. We have noted that, and many suicides and many attempts of suicide. So that tells you how desperate the women and girls and the situation they're in. I mentioned the issue of loss of livelihood. I think that's a really big concern and a major need. I think before COVID, we were already seeing reduced services. There were, for example, refugees rely a lot on food provisioned by the World Food Program and other partners. And
which was actually cut recently.
It was cut because there's not enough funding. And so they have to bridge that gap to provide extra food through the livelihood that they're doing. Many women are actually in the informal sector. In Kampala and even in the settlements, they are working in the informal sector. With the restrictions, they are not able to do what they were able to do to meet that need. So livelihood has become a very, very big concern for everybody. But most especially, it affects women because then they have to also fend for their children and their communities. I also mentioned briefly about education. I think education is really, really key. 85% of our population, the 1.4 population, are school going. So 85% of this 1.4 people are at the moment sitting at home without that opportunity for their development. So that is a big concern generally. And we are addressing this in various ways, and maybe I could just say a bit about what we do in terms of what we're doing in terms of programming in this period.
Programming interventions to ensure benefit for the refugee women, girls, and other vulnerable groups.
In the times of COVID. I think we do a lot, and since the discussion is on women and children, I'll keep to that. But we do a lot of things. So we have joined hands as the UN community. We have joined hands with the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Gender, and other stakeholders to upgrade the structures in the refugee hosting areas. We have supported in upgrading the quarantine and isolation centers. We have donated ambulances, few, but at least that goes to help. We have also, as the Commissioner mentioned, supported refugees to produce masks, not just for themselves, but also for the communities around them. So these are some of the things we are doing. But in terms of addressing the specific needs of women and children, again, even the access to information itself is an area of intervention.
Right.
From the beginning, we had to think of ways of how do we get the information out to the different groups of refugees. We have to communicate in a way that is easy for them to understand.
Indeed.
And is easy for them to access. So we work with a lot of partners. We have over 100 partners in the humanitarian and development world, and we have had to adjust our programming to address those. So we've produced a lot of material in terms of information. There is talk shows ongoing, door-to-door communication happening. And also, I think one of the things that we need to celebrate, and today is World Refugee,
Tomorrow,
is World Refugee Day, are the refugees themselves.
Indeed.
I think the refugees have come out in a very big way.
The strength, resilience, the courage.
Yes, absolutely. In this response, because of the restrictions, as humanitarian workers, we were not present at the time where we were supposed to be present. We were not present in the settlements. And the refugees have stepped up, and they have been able to breach that gap. We have many community structures that are functioning in the refugee settlements. There are village health teams, there are refugee welfare committees that the Commissioner has mentioned. Every sector has a committee that is dedicated to support the community to access services. So what we've done is we have capacitated this refugee committees. We have, together with the partners, supplied mobile phones. We have supplied airtime. We have supplied bicycles to empower them to be able to do more. But it's really, really, really encouraging to see how refugees have come out, you know, and stepped up to support their communities. So we've come up with a community engagement plan, which I believe is for the immediate, but also for the long term.
Indeed.
I think this is how it should be done in the first place. I think the communities have a lot of capacities, and it's our responsibility to draw and to capacitate that effort by the communities themselves. So there are interventions in many areas. I think it's perhaps also good to mention that the Ministry of Education has also come up with guidance, specific guidance, in terms of continuous learning for pupils, and we are also supporting those efforts. In the refugee settlements, we have supported learning materials, distribution of learning materials together with partners. We have distributed radios. We are contributing towards the radio learning programs that are happening. It is not enough. I think we are in a crisis, and we are yet to see the worst of it. So these are some of the things that we are doing. And for the women specifically, to address the specific needs of women, one critical area is the case management of particularly the survivors of violence and the children at risk. And what we've done is we've been able to adapt our systems to provide emergency case management remotely through the committees that I've spoken about. We have a robust interagency feedback mechanism, which is essentially a hotline where refugees, as they wish, they can call us to ask questions, and they can call us for counseling, they can call us for information, and we're able to guide them on where to go. And we're able to guide them on how to address some of those cases. So we've done a lot, but again, COVID has forced us to adapt, and we are adapting our systems. The structures that we have are completely disrupted. And we've seen a lot of benefits sometimes. You asked if there were benefits. Most of it is negative, but the biggest benefit, as I mentioned, is you know, for the refugees who have come up to support themselves in mask production and things like this, and also with the community engagement and empowerment. But then there are challenges in this when we're trying to modify the systems. There are a lot of challenges. We don't have enough funding. We don't have enough money to be able to adopt in the way that we would have liked.
Amazing. Margaret Atieno, she is the Assistant Representative Protection at UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. At this point in time, I'd like to highlight the presence of our online panel, our panelists, that is Honorable Farida Charity. She's the Speaker of Yumbe District Local Government, and also Miss Juliet Were. She is the Deputy Executive Director of Women's International Peace Center. Now, if you're watching this show and you'd want to actually submit your questions, yes, we are going to be answering those questions later on between 4:30 and 5 p.m. So right now, ensure that you're typing on your phone, tablet, or computer. Send those messages on our NTV pages, NTV Uganda, Facebook, and Twitter. My panelists, 5 of them, shall be able to respond to those queries later on. So make sure you bring in those questions. Let me come to you, Ms. Adekemi Ndiele. You are the Deputy Country Representative of UN Women Uganda. Help us understand, what are some of the strategies that should be considered for mainstreaming gender in humanitarian action during COVID-19 and beyond?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Commissioner, and my colleague, Margaret. Thank you so much.
Right.
And I would like to re-echo the voice of the panelists in saying a big applaud and appreciation to the government of Uganda in extending generosity to the highest number of refugees for any African country.
Right.
That's a record, and it is a plus for Uganda. And in spite of the challenges that Uganda is going through. And you've just had the statistics, 82% of those who seek refuge in this country are actually women and children. And
61% are under the age of 20.
Yes.
Quite scary
So
statistics.
yes, we have a lot of youth who are very vibrant and raring to act and raring to go. In terms of strategies, UN Women is as part of a global interagency standing committee that addresses humanitarian action across the world. And it's called IASC, and they've come up with a template, or should I say a template or a strategy for mainstreaming gender into humanitarian action. And of course, when a crisis hits any country or any community, the first thing to do is not to begin to deploy services or provide support. While support is very much needed, the first thing to do is, as the services are being provided to what can be seen, it's important to analyze the situation. Analyze the crisis. What is the impact of crisis on men as different from women, as different from boys and girls? Each of the segments of the society have their own different needs. Crisis hits different segments of society differently. And we know that those who have the shorter end of the stick are usually women and children. Because of their peculiar needs, because of their circumstances, some being cultural, some being biological, and also their cultural norms that also inhibit their equal access to some of the provision of these services. So once the analysis is conducted, then we begin to design. And within the context of the UN, I'm sure you know about the Sustainable Development Goals, and Goal 16 looks at peace and security within the context of communities.
Sure.
And the mantra of the United Nations for the SDGs is actually reaching the furthest behind first, and we also have a very important policy of do no harm. So while these programs are being designed, it's important that we look at what the challenges are, that we do not want to do any harm. Let me give a practical example, because we're talking about COVID, but this now is looking at those who were in refugee settlements or within the markets. Now the policy was, oh, let them go and let the women sleep in the market. But was there analysis conducted to know if their needs were being met, if there were toilet facilities, if they had access to security, if they had access to mosquito nets, if they had access to other very seemingly insignificant provisions, but which are actually would have made them more comfortable. Did they want to sleep in the market? Were they consulted with? So in terms of the analysis and the design, the analysis fits into the design, and looking at the design, we must ensure that whatever programs or policies that government is putting in place do no harm to those who will be beneficiaries, as well as other stakeholders within that context.
I can already see Mr. Simon Menya itching to weigh in, but go ahead, Mrs. Adekemi.
Okay, so
yes.
Once those have been designed and have analyzed and designed, the next thing is access. Who is farthest behind? Those are the ones to get access first. So again, let's look at the economic stimulus package, which is targeting the big industries, those who are the higher echelon of the economy of this country, and very little that's been done to those who are the most vulnerable, those in the informal sector, and which, of course, refugees fall into that bracket. We know that, for example, the Ministry of Gender has almost the lowest budget. So how indeed would government be able to reach out to those who are the most vulnerable amongst us and who actually need just very little to get along in life? So we're talking about access to these facilities and to these opportunities. And so looking at that, one of the interventions that UN Women has put in place is we've worked very closely with an organization called TPO to provide psychosocial support services to refugees. And just like my sister Margaret said, women's groups are sewing. So UN Women has provided sewing machines. In Adjumani, for example, there's the community where we've supplied up to 30 machines to the women's groups to be able to sew face masks, not just for the general public, but for the refugees themselves, because they may not be able to afford to buy.
So this is a case of refugees helping refugees.
Exactly.
Right.
And also meeting the need and knowing the needs that exist within the community and supplying those needs. So once you talk about access, you also look at the issue about participation. And that's where I brought up the issue about women being able to determine and actually have agency and the voice to determine the way things should be. Women and children need to be consulted in any policies that are being put in place. And so a strategy is to ensure that they actually fully participate in decision making at all levels. And that way we can be sure that they will be able to benefit more appropriately from the provisions that are being provided. And then for them to be able to benefit effectively, we then look at training. Do they have the capacity to be able to implement? Okay, for example, yesterday I was at a meeting where we're talking about people living with HIV. Most of the time they are seen as just beneficiaries of policies and programs that are designed for in a particular context. We need to begin to see them as participants and as advocates and as decision makers. These task forces, have they created the opportunity for the most vulnerable to be part of decision making at task force level? If they are not, if they don't have access to decision making and their issues are not on the table, they are not likely to benefit from this. And so we need to train them. And what UN Women is doing, we're training groups of women, and the NGOs that we're working with are actually training women's groups to capacitate the communities and the refugees to understand advocacy, to be able to advocate for their rights. And also we're providing training. Many of them are farmers, So we're providing training for them to be able to benefit more from agricultural opportunities. We're also providing entrepreneurship training, economic empowerment training, so that they can their livelihoods can be strengthened and they're able to come out of poverty more easily. So also, one very important thing is to look at protection within the context of the needs of refugees. Right. We heard of the scandal about 10 years ago in Haiti, where a particular organization took advantage of the refugees and
yes.
the displaced communities. And so when we talk about prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, all activities and interventions that are being implemented would need to consider and put structures and mechanisms in place to ensure that there is no abuse, either from humanitarian actors or
right.
from government actors and participants at community level.
All right.
So,
Ms. Adekemi Ndiali,
yes.
she's the Deputy Country Representative for UN Women. Our online panelists are also itching to say something. I do have Ms. Juliet Were. She is actually the Deputy Executive Director of Women's International Peace Center. Ms. Juliet, let me point this question over to you. Help us share some of the best practices and lessons you've learned while responding to the refugee women and girls' needs during COVID-19.
Thank you very much. Before COVID, women's rights organizations had invested in time and effort to build the leadership capacities of women in refugee settlements. So when COVID struck, we already had an infrastructure of women ready to take lead and be able to respond and improve the situation. The Women's International Peace Center and other rights organizations have been able to strengthen the refugee welfare councils, engaged women to take up leadership, and today we have 32%, in other places 50% of women in leadership on the refugee welfare councils. We have also trained a number of women on peace building and mediation. And the Women Peace Mediators Network was set up in Ajumani and Bidibidi settlements. So with this strong infrastructure of women in place, COVID coming, we had a team that was ready to get to the front line and be able to support. One of the key issues that we have seen the women leaders take is being vigilant in sensitizing communities on the COVID situation, being cognizant of the porous border points, and engaging other refugee women and girls to be on the front line to ensure that nobody enters and takes advantage of this. So providing information has been a key tool in ensuring that other refugee communities are aware and are able to abide by the regulations. And as actors, we've noticed that the women leaders also need support. So the Peace Center, Uganda Women's Network, and other actors mobilize basic tools that are required, including masks, providing enough soap to facilitate the hand washing campaign,
right,
but also providing sanitary towels to ensure that when the women go out to do the awareness raising, they are dignified and confident as they do their work. We have seen that in this COVID situation, there are challenges of access to food. The ratios of food were reduced from 18 kilos of maize per head per month to 8 kilos of maize per head per month. So this means that the responsibility of providing food for families remained on the burden of women. So we have seen women coming up with kitchen gardens, being able to grow vegetables, being able to grow potatoes, foods that can grow at a faster period to be able to facilitate and supplement the little foodstuffs that is around. This situation found an already vulnerable context where there are relationships that have been broken. And we have seen that there have been a number of domestic conflicts at households in the different parts of the country, in the different parts of the world. The situation has not been neither different in the refugee settlements. So the trained women peace mediators have continued to play a key role in terms of mediating family conflicts, looking at those triggers for conflict that could erupt into the community, addressing issues of child neglect, issues of inter-ethnic differences. And we found that this has contributed to building a peaceful environment, enhancing peaceful coexistence, and also recognizing the importance of women taking leadership in resolving conflicts at all times. We have also seen women continue to play and contribute to the protection role by documenting cases of sexual violence, cases of different conflicts, cases of challenges that families are facing. And this is important in contributing to a database, in bringing data that we can refer to as we go along and make a case, but also linking the issues to the police and other protection structures so that the issues of sexual violence and other offenses are managed.
Right.
Because with COVID, it does not mean that other offenses have reduced, but actually they are increasing. So we continue to see women continue to play a key role, and this is a motivator, but it is also an indicator of the importance of investing in building women's leadership at all times and at all levels. What we are learning from the work that we are doing is that it is important for us to have a strong base of women in leadership.
Why is it important?
Because if we... Yes, please.
Why is it so important to have women in these positions of leadership?
Because women play a key role, first as a human rights issue,
right,
but also as nurturers of families in peace building, as key leaders in their communities. They have to be part of the structures so that the agenda and needs of women are part of the policy, are part of the plans, are part of the programming. Because they know their issues more, they know the challenges they face, and they know which strategies can work to improve the context that they are facing. We have also learned that peace building work is key at all levels and at all times. With COVID, with no COVID, in humanitarian settings, peace building should be a part of the continuum that we utilize at all levels. But we also learn and want to emphasize that the referral pathways in the refugee settlements should be well facilitated and strengthened at all times.
Right.
so that when women come to seek the service, they are able to get response and to have their issues addressed on time. Women need to have communication gadgets. We've noticed that the digital divide is very low. Women are not able to communicate as fast as they can. Either they lack data, they lack airtime, the connection is poor. So there's also need to boost the communication services within the refugee settlements so that they are part of the information grid and can continue engaging and contributing. And we need to invest in a public education component so that sensitization continues on issues of COVID, but issues of sexual violence, issues of livelihood, issues of leadership, and the different policies that are available to enable us respond to the refugee processes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Juliet Were. She is the Deputy Executive Director of Women International Peace Center. At this opportune moment, I would also like to invite Honorable Farida Charity. I see you right there. You are the Speaker of Yumbe District Local Government. Share with us some of the best practices and lessons you've learned while responding to women and girls' needs during COVID-19. And when you're done with that, Ms. Farida Charity, also help us understand how you are working with local authorities and leaders to ensure that young women are not being abused during COVID-19. Go ahead.
Before I go to the best practices, I want to give a small background.
Please go ahead.
Of Yumbe District Local Government.
Yes.
Yumbe, as we all know, Uganda, a heart for humanity and generosity. Yumbe is not exclusive. Yumbe started hosting refugees since 1950s, and then 205 to 6, 207 to 8, and now the current one, offering productive customary land to host the refugees. Simply because the people of Yumbe are aware that in the past years, they were refugees. So they think by South Sudanese coming to Yumbe, you never know. God forbid, we are not anticipating any insurgency. But in case of any insurgency, the nearest place the people of Yumbe can seek asylum is South Sudan. So we host them in a good spirit that when we also knock at their door, they should open their door for us. In this vein, Yumbe is hosting over 232 South Sudanese refugees.
Right.
And amongst this, we have over 122 women, 110 men, implying that the population of women is more than the men. And this means a lot added to the COVID-19 that has come. Coming to the best practices and lessons learned responding to refugee women and girls' needs in COVID-19, we have attained maximum cooperation from the local government, OPM, UN agencies, the partners, that is IPs and OPs, who are over 45 in Yumbe district. By this, all these key stakeholders have come together to form a district task force to fight against COVID-19. This has streamlined the coordination mechanisms, response to strategies and operations, and among the local government, UN agencies, IPs, and OPs, we have attained that kind of cohesion. We think this is a best practice working together. though it has not been one during the emergency in 2016, where many stakeholders, partners, and the local government were struggling to understand the roles and the responsibilities of each party in responding to the emergency in 2016. So we think coming together is a best practice. Two, as Yumbe, we think we should stand alone. We have established quarantine centers, around 3 centers now, where suspects and alerts are being taken to. And all this with the support of the different key stakeholders. And in these quarantine centers, when you go there, you will clearly see that women have an area demarcated for them, specifically for them, where their needs can be addressed.
Yes.
And we think that is the best practice. And another best practice is continuous awareness creation against GBV. It has been a practice in our community here, both host and refugees, that men actually do not eat at home.
Is that so?
In the morning, our men at the trading centers, they come back when everybody is asleep. But this time, the lockdown has forced them to have breakfast, lunch, and even supper at home. So a man staying at home, and most of these are men who are not in a formal employment arena. These are people who would go out to work and provide food for their families. So when they are there eating food and they don't provide, GBV has become imminent. So we have, as task force, ensured that awareness creation is being ensured on our local radio stations to make sure that there's harmonious living within families in the communities. We have also have distribution of locally raised relief to the vulnerable families, especially those women-headed families and people living with HIV/AIDS. We all know most men, around 70 to 60%, have run away from their responsibilities as husbands at home. In the gardens, you find women. In the markets, they are themselves. They provide food. They are the breadwinners of their families. So coupled to the lockdown, meaning movements have been restricted. So task force, the district task force of Yumbe,
right,
allocate and distribute locally raised relief to these most vulnerable women-headed families and the other vulnerable families.
Amazing.
We also provide dignity kits. That is the sanitary materials like pants, pads, soap to the women in the quarantine centers. We all know that women have unique needs that if not catered for, you find life becomes very hard for them.
Miss Charity Farida, Miss Charity Farida,
yes,
I'll just interrupt you for a second. Help us highlight some of those needs that women actually can't do without.
The needs that women need, like pads. Someone is taken to quarantine center, maybe with a cloth or two. And nature does not wait. Nature doesn't know that someone is in a quarantine center. So we think pants, pads, soap, basin, water is available where women are put in the quarantine centers. And right now, when you come to Yumbe quarantine centers, you find all these in their in where they are being placed. Then we also think Yumbe is one of the districts hit with the clean water source. When we are hit by the pandemic, our rapid response team, headed by our WAS officer in the district, did assessment of non-functional boreholes around the district and the settlement. Over 350 non-functional boreholes were assessed, And as I talk now, efforts are being made to rehabilitate. There are those that are already being rehabilitated, and then there are those that are not yet rehabilitated because of inadequate resources. But we think as our cooperation continues, all these boreholes will be rehabilitated, as we cannot fight COVID without clean water source. We also, I want to thank my colleague Juliet. She said it all. Involvement of women in leadership, especially in the task forces now, is very key, because there is nothing for the women without the women themselves. Men may not articulate clearly problems of women. For this, in our task force, our DHO, maternal health, is heading the ambulance service team.
So you're doing everything in your power to ensure that the COVID-19 response is at least gender sensitive.
Exactly. And it is in Yumbe.
Now help us.
Is there. Why we think this would be strategically be there is these ambulances mainly carry expectant mothers to the health centers. And much as Uganda has a policy that every parish must have a health center, this is not the case with Yumbe. We still have women who would walk over 5 kilometers to access health services. So we think her being there is so strategic that women can even be picked from their homes, not necessarily the health center, because the labor takes it at any time, and this is the practice being done in Yumbe. So we think it's there strategically, and we are so proud of it.
The good thing, Ms. Farida, the good thing we do have, Honorable Simon Gerard Menye, the Acting Commissioner for Refugees, right here in studio. He shall address those issues, especially on women empowerment and why there are so few women in leadership positions. But then we are also getting information that since at least 2019, refugees have kept streaming into Uganda in droves, at least on a daily basis. That's 50 refugees on a daily basis coming in from South Sudan and 200 refugees coming in from neighboring Burundi. Help us ascertain whether or not this story is true, and if these children, unaccompanied women and children, are coming through the border during this time of COVID-19. Where are they staying? Who is taking care of them? How are they faring? And how is it possible that people are still coming through those porous borders, yet we are under lockdown?
Yes.
Ms. Charity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Go ahead. We want you to help us expound on this story, whether or not it's true. Are people still entering through the porous borders, especially from South Sudan? We are getting reports that 50 people are entering on a daily basis.
Not really. We are not receiving any new arrivals because it has been put on hold.
No, Miss Charity, they are doing it illegally through the porous borders.
Yes?
They are doing it illegally. They are entering the country through the porous borders. So help us understand the risk of having such people come in from a hotbed of coronavirus like Southern Sudan and DRC, which has 5,000 cases, entering through the country through those porous borders. What does that mean? Isn't that scary to you, Ms. Farida Charity?
I'm sorry, the wave is not so clear, but I have not got you so clear, moderator.
I was saying, Ms. Charity, the issue of people streaming into the country through the porous borders illegally. The South Sudanese, 50 of those on a daily basis, and 200 people from DRC. And remember, in DRC, they have 5,000 cases of coronavirus. When you go to Southern Sudan, that is 1,800 positive cases of coronavirus. Now, aren't you scared that there will be some kind of community transmission of COVID-19 if these people continue streaming into the country unnoticed?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, I think as of now, since the lockdown, the movement of outside immigrants into Uganda has been restricted. And we want to thank the government of Uganda by deploying armament at all the borders. And we have also asked that we may not exclusively protect these border points, but we have asked our community members, especially in the settlement, to report any new arrivals from outside the country and outside the district for surveillance team to pick and take to quarantine center for monitoring. So for this movement has been restricted, and I think also the other side movement has been restricted. So if it is there, it is very minimal. But the fact also is, when you come to Yumbe, there is no single family in Yumbe where there is no relative in South Sudan. They do sneak, but so long as they reach the community members alert that when a new arrival is registered in a family, if the family cannot report, then neighbors report. So they have been picked. So I think we have very small fear of people intruding from outside.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Charity Farida. She is the Speaker of Yumbe District Local Government. Yes, go ahead, Charity. Maybe?
Yeah. Involvement of girl child in agricultural production during COVID-19, we thought is a very good practice. That in the past, during our ancestral times, children used to dig. During weekends, children used to be taken in the gardens with their families to dig. But this has decayed in the current generation. So now through mobilization and sensitization, we have continuously created awareness in our community members to engage these children to do farm work.
On the importance of agriculture.
Because we think by doing farm work, this will instill in them a spirit of teamwork, of hard work. And that will make them stand independently, as Uganda is hit with the problem of unemployment.
All right, Ms. Charity, I think the message has been sent home. Young people should be actually encouraged to join agriculture. All right, thank you very much, Charity Farida from Yumbe District right there. She's the Speaker of the District Local Government. My name is Romeo Busiku and you're watching NTV. Tomorrow is World Refugee Day. It's a day where we commemorate refugees all over the world, and we also honor the strength and courage of all refugees all over the world. We are going to take a very short break, but we'll be right back with more information right here on NTV. Keep those questions coming through. We are going to be sampling those at around 4:30 p.m. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Like I mentioned on the show earlier, World Refugee Day is commemorated every 20th of June every year. And this day honors refugees, their strength, their courage, their resilience after everything they go through. Yes, and also not only just honoring their strength and their courage, but also we encourage public awareness and support of these refugees, people who have had to escape conflict and leave their homelands. I do have Margaret Atieno. She is the Special Representative, Assistant Representative, UNHCR, under protection. In the middle, I do have Ms. Adekemi Ndiali. She is the Deputy Country Representative, UN Women. And also on the far left, I do have Honorable Simon Gerard Menya. He is the Acting Commissioner for Refugees in the Office of the Prime Minister. Via online, we do have Ms. Julie Were. She is the Deputy Executive Director, Women International Peace Center, and also Honorable Charity Farida. She's the Speaker, Yumbe District. Now, let me come to you, Honorable Simon Gerard Menya. She hinted at a very, very, very good issue. That is Ms. Julie. She said that women need to be in positions of leadership to actually veer the vehicle of their lives, or at least to control their own lives. Is this being affected in your COVID-19 response plan?
Chair, Moderator, before I respond to that question, allow me to comment briefly on what Margaret said.
Please go ahead.
On. Margaret mentioned of dwindling resources from the international community. By implication, she meant that there is international fatigue, and as far as sourcing for resources, both financial and financial, to support the refugee response worldwide, including Uganda. I want to say that I think the international community should not get fatigued. Refugee protection and management is not a local problem.
I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Simon, but the international community is not fatigued per se. The international community is afraid that the money that they are doling out is being misused in corrupt tendencies and not doing the work that it's mandated to do. That's why they are fatigued.
No.
Go ahead.
No, moderator.
According to the research I'm getting.
No, actually, I was building my point from the angle that Margaret mentioned.
All right, go ahead.
That there is donor fatigue. She gave the example of World Food Program that has
had
rations. A food cut of 30%.
Yes.
To what it is giving to the people of concern, simply because they claim that there are no resources coming from the international community. And I was saying that refugee protection and management is not a local issue. For Uganda and any other country that is hosting refugees, have their own problems. And therefore, if we cannot afford to provide decent health accommodation, construction of roads, and also putting in place other infrastructure, then we cannot say that we have the resources to cater for the 1.4 million people who are our guests in this country. So I was saying that the international community should make it a point that they look for these resources. They should not get fatigued. Because if Uganda also says that we are tired and we are fatigued, then you can imagine what the repercussions would be. It presupposes that we shall have to ask our brothers and sisters to go back to where they came from. Because we may not have the resources to cater for them, really. So I want to encourage the international community, my sister, the UN, the UN Women, UNHCR, World Food Program, and the rest to continue sourcing for the resources, to knock on the doors, because the problem is international.
Right.
We're not responsible for where they are coming from. There are challenges that these countries are facing, which are leading to their flight.
And it's a global phenomenon.
And it's a global phenomenon.
It's not only Uganda. 79.5 million refugees globally. People are displaced.
Yes. So this is an international problem. It cannot be left. It cannot be left
to Uganda,
to be managed and and be responded to by the government of the Republic of Uganda. We have no capacity.
Indeed.
I thought I should make this one public.
And you have. Go ahead.
And I have been. Now, going back to empowering women,
in leadership positions.
In leadership position. First and foremost, I want to say that there are processes that we go through. Before empowering women, we need to, we look at these women from a point of providing them with life-saving assistance. You cannot simply ask my sister Margaret or my sister from the UN and he said that now you are the LC1 chairperson, or now you are responsible for doing ABCD, when she lacks the essentials of life: water, health, food. And some of them have been molested, abused psychologically, emotionally, sexually, physically. And by the time this person comes to Uganda, actually is a human being, is a woman, is a child, but psychologically and mentally I think he's devastated. So they need immediate rehabilitation before we consider empowering them. Yes, now we have also, after meeting those needs, which are psychosocial in nature, then we can begin thinking of how we can now begin mainstreaming them and integrating them into leadership positions. And this we have done. We have come up with the legislations and policies and guidelines how this can be done. It is now a must that in every leadership position, the welfare councils, there must be a certain limitation. We are saying 1/3% of every council must be constituted by women. So that is one way to empower women in leadership position, and this is taking effect in all our refugee settlements and all our welfare councils. The other issue is that today we have 264 implementing and operating partners in the refugee response. And each one of them has been asked in their MOU to do something about women empowerment, women emancipation. We were encouraging them to do that in whatever they are doing. And we are so strict to the extent that we look at their MOUs and their activities and their strategies to ensure that women-related activities are incorporated, mainstreamed in their work plans and programs. So that is one way that we are doing it. And we want to say that something is being done. and quite a number of them, some women have been helped, and we also have. Besides that, we are also talking about how do I bring it out? We have encouraged girl education,
right.
a kind of an affirmative action program.
Indeed.
For the girl children or for the girl child. In our refugee response, we encourage these children to ensure that they go to school, and we have quite a number of implementing and development partners that have given support to the government, and also are giving support to our persons in need, to ensure that many children go to school. Like I said, 82% of our refugees are women and children. And the majority of these children also, again, are girls, not only boys, because some of these girls remain behind to wage wars, to fight and fend for themselves. And so we continue to ensure that these children go to school. These children are provided with the necessities of life, to ensure that they are maintained at school. They are retained to continue going to school, and so that by the end of the day, they acquire the necessary skills to fend for themselves locally. We have the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Welfare. He's coming up with a response plan where women economic emancipation is being considered seriously, and we are also banking on development partners to support this response plan, to ensure that women are empowered, they are skilled, they are tooled with the necessary skills, so that they are able to engage in meaningful activities, so that they fend for themselves. About 6% of refugees in Uganda are urban, are living in urban areas, and the majority of these are women again. And we are encouraging women they come to my offices or to our offices. They want to go and get loans, to open up bank accounts. Some of them, they are supported. They are supported by different implementing partners to ensure that they engage in mini trade, in small businesses. All these are aimed at empowering them economically, and so something is being done. Something is being done.
And also, on the issue of funding, you mentioned that if all doesn't go well, if you don't get help from UN Women or UNHCR, you might be forced to send the refugees back home. But then, as it is in Southern Sudan, there's a peace accord that was signed. What is forcing you? What is stopping you, Mr. Menya, from sending the refugees back?
No. That one was conditioned. We are saying. Please remember where I came from.
Yes, I understand.
I was saying that the international community is getting fatigued, and it is reducing its funding to the refugee response in Uganda, and I think in some other countries as well. But we are saying, what can we do? What are we left with to do? So we are saying that if we are left with such a situation, this morning the Honorable Minister in charge of the sector for refugees was re-echoing to it, because he was asked that they hear, the media got it, that by September, other things being equal, the UNHCR may reduce its funding as well.
So let's address
now
that
we are
issue.
saying if it reduces, what can we do?
Away from funding, Mr. Simon, let's address the issue of a peace accord being ratified in Southern Sudan. What is stopping the OPM from sending the refugees back home?
No, well,
is it protocol?
Exactly. This is a diplomatic arrangement. We need UNHCR, Office of the Prime Minister, and the government of the Republic of Sudan have to sit. They haven't sat yet. You cannot make a forced repatriation, a forced send back. So the Office of the Prime Minister, UNHCR, and the government of South Sudan must sit and come up with a repatriation program.
How long will this take?
Well, my sister has the experience in this. She has ever been in several repatriation arrangements. Yes.
She's going to weigh in. Margaret.
Okay, thank you very much. I think on that question of the
peace accord, yes.
I think we are all hoping that the peace will come for the South Sudanese refugees and they'll be able to go back home. But I think it is too early to say that they're actually able to go back. We have seen, this is actually the third or fourth time that these parties have signed a peace accord. It is part of the process.
All right.
There's still a lot to be done to be able to bring peace to South Sudan, for the refugees to have the confidence that they can actually go back and that they can go back in safety and in dignity.
Going back is one thing, but what are they going back to?
What are they going back to? It should be in safety and in dignity. They should go back to real peace. They should be able to rebuild their lives, to be rehabilitated, to reintegrate. I think those conditions are not yet there. Instead, actually, we are still seeing very troubling reports of conflict that is very close to our borders, and we are still seeing people actually in persecution. So it is too early to talk about the South Sudanese going back, but it is important. I think it's important that we work on it, and as UNHCR, we work with the international community. It's also part of our job to find solutions for the refugee situation.
All right, Margaret, let's talk about response.
Yes.
Yes. How are the various refugee beneficiaries responding to the various interventions you put in place to help them during this time of COVID-19? How are they responding? Is it positive? Is it negative? And do you have any statistics in that regard?
Okay, so
on the number of people you've been able to help?
As I said, the refugees are part of the community. So when this situation happened and when the directives were issued, of course, it applies to them like everybody else. And they have also stepped up in order to comply to this situation. So I mentioned how they have come up with interventions themselves. And these interventions, in terms of communication, information, building capacities and responses, I think they've come up in a very big way. I cannot give statistics to say that this is how many have benefited from this.
Yes.
But they're really...
but how are they responding?
I think I can say generally it has been very positive.
True.
It has been very... we have not seen any resistance of any kind to any directives or any... I think the commissioner would speak to that, but I think we've not seen any resistance from the part of refugees. They are participating, if you like, and I think they are participating positively by also giving their input. In terms
not
of
saying that we shall wait for Margaret, let's also do something. Maybe
they
by
were
sewing
doing
some
that
face
even
masks.
before we came in.
Right.
The refugees started producing masks even before we thought of producing masks. We were, as the international community, humanitarian community, and also with the Office of the Prime Minister, when we received this directive, we started pondering on how are we going to get masks for 1.4 million people within a week or two. And we found an answer because the refugees had already started on this even before. Myself, I was able to buy my mask from the refugee communities. So when we learned about this, we said, let us build on it. And that is exactly what we are doing. We have put together very many refugee women groups, even men, by the way. There are men groups and women groups, and helped them and encouraged them to continue producing this mask. So I think they started on it even before. Refugees have, thankfully, access to land. Yes, there is not enough, but the little that they have, the leaders, Madame mentioned that they have put kitchen gardens and things like that. So they are participating in producing material and also in their own livelihood and upkeep. I think that is really important to say in this for World Refugee, especially World Refugee Day, especially because it's about celebrating refugees.
All right, Ms. Ndiali, help us understand what kind of activities are the refugees, or what kind of activities are you engaging the refugees in?
Okay, let me quickly speak to this issue that the Commissioner has raised
about
resources and about the fact that the international community should continue.
True.
Yes. So, I mean, there's pressure all across the world.
But where is the pressure coming from?
Because of the slump in the economic picture of the entire world. So where they begin to pull out resources is usually in international aid, because then they begin to look inwards and they want to provide economic stimulus packages for their own citizens, because this comes from, support from different countries. So while I understand, and usually even in community settlements where we have refugees, there's intense pressure on all resources. It might be land or access to agricultural inputs and services, there's pressure on all these services. So importance, as our colleague in Yumbe said, of working on social cohesion, working with women's groups to increase the capacity of women's groups, and now I'm moving into what we've been doing, to understand their rights and also to build peace and be mediators at domestic, in terms of domestic violence and at community level. And while you were asking, why do women want to be leaders? Why not? Because if we're saying 82% of the refugees are women,
yes.
So well, how would their voices be heard if they themselves do not have a voice in the decisions that affect their lives?
Mr. Simon is saying the reason they cannot empower them is because they are so traumatized. So the first thing they do is rehabilitate them, get them the basics, and then maybe leadership roles can come later.
I give the example of a ship that is being built in, as it's sailing.
I see where you're going.
So both have to happen. No, while you're putting in place programs that would empower women, they need to also help you make the decision, because they know best the needs that they have, and they know best how to meet those needs. So importance of consultation, as I earlier mentioned, and giving them the opportunity to participate in decision making and say, no, actually, we do not want to sleep in the markets, or no, we do not want to have access to this kind of services, whereas we need these services.
But
so
if it's the men coming up with the policies,
they would not know. So it has to be a mix of men and women and youth also. Those youth are also often marginalized, and mostly the young women as well. They do not have access to decision-making opportunities. So building their capacity to understand how to administer resources, understand how to meet the needs of community, understand how to governance issues, understand the laws of the communities. So these are issues that need to be put in place to support women to make those decisions. Now, also UN Women provides psychosocial support services at local level, but not directly. We work in close collaboration with women's groups. There's a new fund that is being deployed in refugee settlements, and it is called the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund. And we're providing that fund to support women's groups to build the capacity of women at community level in the settlements to build their capacity so that they are able to unlock their economic potentials and are able to come out of poverty. So also we provide legal aid services and work very closely with some organizations, like I mentioned TPO earlier on, and also CARE International. We're working very closely with International Peace Center to build peace in those communities and ensure that the services that are being provided, communities are able to benefit from these services, and there's peace, and working with young people to benefit from these services as well.
Wonderful submission. Let me bring in Ms. Juliet Were, the Deputy Executive Director of Women International Peace Center. Ms. Juliet, you've been in several countries doing humanitarian work and some research in that regard. You've been to Sierra Leone, you've been to Uganda here, of course. You've also been to DRC, you've been to so many countries. Help us understand, what are some of those common challenges that are plaguing refugees in Uganda, Southern Sudan, DRC, Sierra Leone, Nepal? What are some of those challenges? And you, as a social justice advocate, what are some of the challenges you've grappled with while executing your work? Ms. Julia, take it away.
The major challenge are the low levels of education of women and girls, and this hinders their active participation in different facets of life.
Right.
But also the fact that these countries do not have proactive policies for the empowerment of women and girls. So this deprives their continued growth and participation to the community development. But the fact that armed conflict continues to to be inactive in these countries. It makes it difficult for women to engage with other women in other countries, but also to be able to take advantage of any other opportunity that will be in place. Because infrastructure is not functional, the economic base is very low, but also their voice is not that strong. So these are general issues that women in Africa, especially in conflict and post-conflict settings, continue to face. So for this to be addressed, it requires a regional approach using platforms for the African Union, the International Conference of the Great Lakes region, the ECOWAS, the SADC, so that a common strategy and position to addressing issues of conflict in Africa are resolved. Then we can have peace, we can have women go back to their countries, but they can also be able to take up in community development and national legislation processes.
And the challenges you've grappled with as a social justice advocate, you as an individual.
As a social justice advocate?
Yes. While executing your work, what are some of the challenges you've grappled with?
One of the key challenges is insecurity and your safety while you're doing this work.
Right.
You're not sure whether you'll come back home alive. But not being able to provide immediate response. Where you find many women have been sexually violated, they are having challenges of reproductive health complications, they need emergent response and surgery, and there is no action you can take there and then because it needs heavy financial investment.
Right.
But also the high levels of psychosocial challenges and trauma depriving women's active engagement and rebuilding their agency. Not just among the women, but also the service providers. You find the medical workers, the politicians, that everyone is traumatized and not able to come up with a proactive response to address issues.
Right. All right, Ms. Judith Welle, thank you very much. Let me also bring in Honorable Charity Farida. She is the Speaker of Yumbe District Local Government. Let's talk about some of the missing gaps in Uganda's COVID-19 refugee response plan. Help us understand what are those missing gaps and how best can they be addressed, Ms. Charity Farida, and also the challenges you've grappled with while executing your work. Ms. Charity, did you hear the question? I think she didn't. I think we lost Ms. Charity right there. Let me bring in Mr. Simon.
I want to comment quickly on the challenges that Madame
Juliet Were
mentioned. What are some of them? And indeed, she did a very good job. She mentioned quite a number of them. But there was one fundamental challenge or gap that we normally don't mention, and this is environmental degradation. It has been established through studies that wherever refugees have settled for only 1 year, 58% of the vegetation cover is destroyed. You can imagine the extent and the level of degradation that will go on for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the lane. And therefore, it is important that international community and the government and local authorities address the issue of environmental degradation so that we are able to restore the environment by planting trees and also ensuring that even the wetlands are properly managed and then settled on. So this is a great challenge that we face in all our settlements. Trees have been cut as a source of livelihood in terms of charcoal, selling, even usage at home. Trees have been cut for furniture, for building materials. Grass and vegetation has been also destroyed for various reasons. And to me, that is a challenge that we need to address. The other issue, which Madam will mention briefly, is to do with with illnesses. Some of them, or some of which, are terminal illnesses. This is a refugee, a woman or a man, running away from persecution, from general disorder in his country or her country of origin, but at the same time is sick, suffering from HIV/AIDS, suffering from Ebola, suffering from he's mentally derailed because of what he has gone through. And of late, I want also to quickly say that of late, even men have been sodomized at these militia points. And so it's not only about women that are being abused sexually, but even men are also sexually. We have received reports that also even children, men, women, they are all sexually abused, and they are mentally and psychologically affected, or even emotionally affected. So these are some of the things that we need to mention and to tackle.
You spoke about men, but then I'll just put it in the perspective of men and women who are elderly. Let's talk about the elderly within the refugee settlements. How are they faring, Mr. Simon?
Well, 3% of our refugees in Uganda are elderly.
So how are they faring, and what are their needs at this point in time during COVID-19?
Their needs are complicated, other than because when you enter into advanced age, you are prone and vulnerable to diseases. Sometimes your strength is gone in terms of fending for yourself, and some of these people have left their families behind, and they are alone. They don't have people who look after them, and so they depend entirely and solely on provisions from the UN system and from government. And so really, it is a double tragedy. So
what is the Office of the Prime Minister doing to alleviate this problem, to offer them some kind of reprieve, the elderly?
Like I said earlier on, Mr. Moderator, protection and management of and also provision of welfare for these people is not a responsibility of the government of Uganda alone. On the contrary, the government of Uganda has done what it can within its means, providing them land, providing them with security, providing them and also sourcing for resources in addition to what the UN system and implementing partners provide. Recently, we got a loan from the World Bank to ensure that we construct, furnish and equip schools and health units, construct roads and so on. All this was done on behalf and for refugees and the districts that are hosting refugees.
That is an amazing intervention.
We have done quite a lot. We are not seated. So, yes.
Indeed. It's an amazing intervention, Mr. Simon Menya Jared. And let me also bring in Margaret. Yes, Margaret, I know you know this very well. UNHCR, what are you doing to alleviate some of the challenges that the elderly are grappling with?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Commissioner, because you already alluded to it.
Yeah, on the government side, but development partners.
Yes, on the government side. So the elderly, they fall within the group that we call persons with specific needs. And it's about 10% of the refugee population that have these specific needs.
That's like 115,000.
150, the number changes, it varies every now and then. So these persons, we try to identify them upon arrival through our registration systems that would tell us that such and such person has this specific need. So once you're identified as a person with specific need, we put you into, first of all, in the database, and then we put you into a program that will be able to support you and support you meet that need. Of course, the first responders are the community themselves. The elderly are moving with their families, and they're moving with the communities. So we look at the capacity within the community to support these elderly persons and how we can support them within that structure. Now, there's a limitation there because the community itself is already suffering. So whilst we know that there are community resilience, there's community resilience and there's community structures that are established, they're already suffering. So they already have, their issues are compounded. So we give extra support. We work with a multitude of partners who then come in and give extra support. They do case management, they document them. There's the elderly, there's the unaccompanied children, there's the persons with disability, there's the lactating mothers, but this is temporary. So there's all these types of specific needs that we look at. So our protection partners, and it's a key responsibility within our programming and interventions, they identify, do the case management for these individuals and try to then put them back in a situation where they are able to support themselves. I wouldn't want to say, yes, we call them, we say it's a specific need, but they're part of the community. They are
Right.
part of us. There's always going to be an elderly person. There's always going to be this child. So we have to go back and say, how does this community work with this child who is unaccompanied, and how does it work with this child who is this person who is elderly? In the times of COVID, we all know that the elderly are at heightened risk.
Indeed.
So we are quite alert to that issue, and we have looked specifically what can we do to first of all, guard guard them and support them not to be exposed to COVID. So we are educating those who are working with them. We've produced a number of guidelines to help those who are working with them to be able to do that. And also some partners have also injected cash into the support, and they're granting cash assistance specifically for the elderly. It's minimal. I think the government has its own social protection program that we acknowledge, and the Ministry of Gender is also working on this, and we are saying that the refugees also should be included in this, and we
the SAGE program.
In the SURGE program or in the social protection program, as we call it. It is not social protection per se, because it's assistance, but in the long term, that is what it is. It is for them to be able to have something that is sustainable.
So you'd want this program to cover even the refugees?
I think it does cover. Of course, as we said, the resources are minimal, so it's a question of how do we bring our resources together? How do we bring all of this? And there are many partners who have stepped in to be able to support. Yes.
Ms. Adekemi Diali, let's talk about the missing gaps in Uganda's refugee response plan. What is missing? Do you think the response plan is gender sensitive in this case?
So this is where the punchline is.
Amazing.
Because of the limited analysis that has been conducted, those who really need the help in terms of tailored needs of the refugees may not be having their needs met. And that's why, as development partners, an appeal was launched by the resident coordinator, Ms. Rosa Malango, in April, where some of these issues were considered. As one UN, we did conduct a gender-sensitive and responsive analysis of the situation of COVID, and also that happened in all refugee settlements across the country. And wherever UN Women has regional offices, this was all brought together, and we put that together as part of the appeal. And of course, funds are coming in for that appeal, but of course, that is not enough as we speak. So in terms of the role of the UN is to complement what the government is doing and address the gaps in such a way that we can partner together. But one very important element in terms of gender mainstreaming, as well as generally in meeting the needs within the refugee context, is coordination. When there are gaps in coordination, there tends to be overlaps, there tends to be duplication, there tends to be competition, and that's why we have organizations like UNHCR, like IOM, and then the regional offices that we have, where they support coordination. So coordination is key in ensuring that the resources are well organized, the needs are identified, the resources are well organized, and then the partners bring in their their distinctive competencies into play, and that is put to the benefit of the beneficiaries. So I think that when it comes to the response plan, I know that the government is working to engender that process. We have been working with the Equal Opportunities Commission as well as the Ministry of Gender to see how that can be strengthened. Of course, the Ministry of Gender has a response plan that has been launched, and we're calling on donors and other partners to please support that response plan, because it's gender responsive and it will be meeting the needs of those who we're talking about, the most vulnerable and those who have been excluded from mainstream support of the government.
Mr. Simon Menya, as we wrap up, we are going to be discussing recommendations. What ought to be done moving forward?
a number of things ought to be done. First of all, there is no system which is perfect in the whole world. One, we need to review our legislation to ensure that our refugee response is relevant. And this, I think, we are doing. We are looking at the policy, we are looking at the acts, we are looking at the and other relevant legislations to ensure that our the legislations and policies are relevant to the current situation. Two, we need to encourage the international community to continue sourcing for resources, both financial and non-financial, to ensure that they continue supplementing and playing their international role and mandate and responsibility of ensuring that refugees are properly protected and provided the welfare so that they live in dignified life in their countries of where they are.
All right.
Three, we need to tackle the question of what is occasioning the flight of refugees from their respective countries into Uganda. Because what we are doing right now is we are treating symptoms, but we shall continue receiving more and more and more and more refugees if nothing is done to tackle what is occasioning that. So there's need for diplomatic effort for member states, for countries, to ensure that peace prevails where these people are coming from, because that's the greatest driver. It is the biggest driver of what we're experiencing today. Until and when that is done, we shall continue receiving more and more refugees.
All right, at this point in time, the phone lines are open. You can call in and give us those questions. Mr. Menya, Mr. Dekemi, Miss Margaret, and Miss Julie will be more than glad to answer your queries. The phone calls, Mr. Teko. Okay, as the phone calls are being worked on, let me come to you, Mr. Dekemi. Recommendations. We are wrapping up. So what ought to be done?
A key recommendation, I have mentioned that before, and I think that this is always conducting a very robust gender analysis. Assessments must be conducted. We have to deploy the resources, while the Honorable Commissioner said, we just need to meet their needs. But, you know, we need to understand those needs first and ensure that those needs are actually targeting the communities. Because when they're not, when the analysis is not conducted effectively, there would always be gaps. Another thing is that the government would need to deploy resources to address gender-based violence. Of course, UN Women and other partners have been conducting awareness-raising activities on television, on radio, and also we've worked with the RDCs to conduct local awareness-raising interventions. So we need to properly inform communities, and so that they understand their rights, and so that they are able to demand those rights, and also them being the rights holders and the duty bearers need to meet those rights at community level.
All right, we do have a phone call coming. Yes, hello, you're live on NTV. Hello, good afternoon, you're live on NTV. What's your query?
You lost the line.
Oh, we lost that one. Yes, just call in, we'll be taking those questions. Don't worry, just call in, we'll be taking those questions. Mr. Simon, Adekemi, and Miss Margaret and Julie will be answering those queries. Ms. Margaret, recommendations as we wrap up. We have some 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think to add on to what the Commissioner and my colleague has said, I think data is key, as my colleague from the UN Women has mentioned, and also long-term solutions. What the Commissioner said is quite right. We need to look at this comprehensively, and we need to be able to say what are the solutions that we are offering refugees. And solutions are many. There are many solutions. They can be found locally. They can also be found outside Uganda. We have programs where we work with the international community to provide legal pathways for refugees to be able to access scholarships, access studies, access work permits abroad, access whatever opportunities that they can get within Uganda and outside Uganda.
Yes,
so
could we be having a caller, Teko?
It's a collaborative effort it's a collaborative
First, hold that
effort.
thought, Ms. Margaret. I think we have a
Thank you.
caller. A very good afternoon. Hello, you're live on NTV. What's your submission? Ms. Margaret, continue.
Okay, so as I said, in terms of solution, it's a collaborative effort, and we have to look at the solutions within and outside Uganda, and to be able to make it, materialize these legal pathways for refugees to have a permanent solution to their situation. And for UNHCR, I think we have long adopted some commitments. I think for a long time now, the High Commissioner has been working on some 5 key commitments to advance the rights of women, and we've come a long way with these commitments. These commitments look at, for example, the issue of registration and how women and how the question of gender actually is addressed within that. We are also looking at the question of livelihood and economic empowerment. I think we have to be able to see what are the capacities and to be able to build these capacities and provide opportunities for refugee women to advance themselves and develop themselves. Also, I think education is also key. Education, I think, for Uganda and for the situation of refugees that we have here is the solution. It's not just a service that we are providing, but it is the long-term solution. How are we going to be able to rebuild South Sudan without education? All
right, and last but not least, I also do have online panelists. I think we did lose Farida, but then we still have Juliet Were. She is the Deputy Executive Director of Women International Peace Center. Ms. Juliet Were, we're in on the recommendations, but before we do that, I think we do have a caller right there. There's a phone call. Yes, good afternoon. Yes, please, we're in on the topic. Please go ahead.
Hello?
Please go ahead.
Hello?
I can hear you loud and clear. You're live on NTV. Your submission.
Brenda from Cuba.
Yes, hello, Brenda.
Most of the partners here and then Kibumba refugees from Kibumba. People are always told that their duties and responsibilities. Because gender-based training is especially refugees. But and they tell
the network is ugly, Teko. Let's try another number. Let's try another number, Teko, real quick. Okay, I think she was alluding to something to do with gender-based violence and what can be done to weed it out of the refugee settlements. I think you can take it over.
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, a lot of awareness raising and implementation of laws, because impunity actually fuels gender-based violence. And so when there are no repercussions for gender-based violence, then that is done with impunity. So ensuring that perpetrators are able to face the music and brought to book for the crimes that they have committed. And also in terms of protection, putting measures in place to protect women. That is very important, identifying the gaps, identifying the issues that lead to their exposure to GBV and ensuring that they are protected. But raising awareness not only amongst women who indeed are the survivors or the victims of violence, but raising awareness amongst men so that they understand that women have autonomy over their bodies and when and not blaming or recriminating women for being subject to violence. And also ensuring that we have measures in place to address domestic violence as well, having safe spaces and shelters. I understand that there are only a few government funded shelters in the country. So putting in place those shelters so that women who are at facing domestic violence have a recourse and are able to be protected.
Like she doesn't have to stay in that
so that
same environment, go through that same ordeal every day. All right.
And then
Mr. Simon Menya also wanted to weigh in.
I want to thank my sister from the UN Women. But I think the issue of gender-based violence is rooted in the upbringing, in the nurturing, in the morals of our parenting. As if a parent or parents are fighting and children are seeing, the chances are that they will pick it up from there and also grow with it. They will think that's the only way to solve a solution, to solve a problem. I think parents must be exemplary to our children to begin with. I think to me that's the bottom line, so that our children can, the next generation after us will see us as upright persons, upright people, upright parents. And if we do that, then the chances are that we shall reduce the occurrence of violence amongst our homes. The other issue which I wanted to quickly mention is that one of the recommendations which I forgot to mention is that we need to grade our recommendations into what can be done immediately, short, medium, and long term. I want to thank my sister for alluding to that. And lastly, resources come at our disposal, and a number of times these resources are abused. The issue of financial management integrity must be observed in whatever we do, so that we give confidence to the people who are sourcing for these resources and giving them to us to operate and implement.
All right, last but not least, we do have an online panelist, Ms. Julie Were. She is the Deputy Executive Director of Women International Peace Center. But then I still have Margaret Atieno. She is the Assistant Representative Protection at the UNHCR. Ms. Farida is back. Ms. Farida Charity, the Speaker of Yumbe District Local Government. Farida, help us with some of the recommendations that can be employed in the interim to actually overcome this ugly situation. Any recommendations you might have?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
One, we urge the international and local partners to continue supporting us in the fight of the COVID, and this can only go well if they attract funding. I pray for funding for them. Number two, there is need to encourage the locals to make their children learn. For those who have radios and TVs, to make their children busy, continue learning on media, so that when they go to school after COVID, they will not forget so many things. Three is I call upon the Ministry of Agriculture and our livelihood partners to actively engage our communities in agricultural production, because I see agricultural production as the only way to handle post-COVID, because now mainly people are focused on the COVID, but people do not look at after the COVID. So I think if we have agricultural production increased, so post-COVID situation will be handled very well. I also call upon teamwork that has already been exhibited in our district, that we should continue to work together with the OPM, UNHCR, and other UN agencies, implementing partners and operating partners in the fight of COVID-19. I also appeal to our parents out there to play their role as parents in upbringing the children, whereas they are with us at home, we need to play a great role in how we can shape their behavior, other than leaving them out to stray out there. So I think these are my humble strategies that I would think if in play, we can fight COVID very well.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Charity, for that submission. Let me also bring in Ms. Juliet Were, the Deputy Executive Director of Women International Peace Center. Ms. Juliet, we are talking about recommendations to overcome this situation. Go ahead.
I would like to emphasize the importance of investing and strengthening communication platforms and providing tools to the women leaders to enable them to continue amplifying their voice but also making visible their contribution to addressing the challenges. We also need to continue investing in building more numbers of women to take up leadership so that their agency can be strengthened and they can continue playing a key role in peace building and recovery efforts. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Juliet Were. Let me give each of my panelists in studio like 30 seconds. Final remarks, and we go. Let's start with you, Margaret. To the viewer.
Thank you very much.
You're addressing the viewer now.
Okay, thank you very much, the panelists and the moderator. I think it has been a great experience. My parting word would be what we have said as UNHCR, that no one is safe until we are all safe. I think we are in this together. It's a collaborative effort, and we have to come together to address, first of all, COVID and survive COVID, and also to be able to bring solutions for the refugee issue that we have here in Uganda.
Ms.
Thank
Ndiali?
you very much.
Mine is with the UN mantra on leaving no one behind, and it's sometimes said reaching the furthest behind first. The refugees are no doubt some of the farthest behind that we have in the development process in this country, and as such, extra effort, special measures need to be put in place to meet their needs and ensure that they are able to live peacefully and peaceful coexistence within the communities where they have been settled.
Mr. Simon.
I want to thank the government of the Republic of Uganda, headed by none other than His Excellency the President, Museveni, for creating Uganda to be an island of peace. An island of peace in such a way that people who are in troubled and who are distressed in neighboring countries are coming here to get this commodity which is rare in their respective countries. I want to thank this government and for coming up with an open policy for our brothers and sisters so that they can come here and live a dignified life.
All right, at that point, we've come to the end of the show. The theme of the dialogue today has been supporting refugee women, girls, and other vulnerable groups' needs during COVID-19. Everyone counts. I'll just maybe repeat that. The theme of the dialogue today has been supporting refugee women, girls, and other vulnerable groups' needs during COVID-19. Everyone counts. My name is Romeo Busiku. I'd like to thank Margaret Atieno, the Assistant Representative UNHCR under protection, and also Ms. Dekemi Adiele. She's the country representative, the Deputy Country Representative for UN Women, and also Honorable Simon Gerard Menya, who is the Acting Commissioner for Refugees in the Office of the Prime Minister, and also our online panelists. We had Charity Farida, the Speaker of Yumbe District Local Government, and last but not least, that is Were. Yes, Ms. Were, I haven't forgotten about you. She is the Deputy Executive Director of Women International Peace Center. Please, everyone counts. That is the case right here. Refugees, everyone counts. My name is Romeo Busiku. Have yourselves a blessed day.